Welcome to Green Building Matters, the original and most popular podcast focused on the green building movement. Your host is Charlie Cicchetti, one of the most credentialed experts in the green building industry and one of the few to be honored as a LEED Fellow. Each week, Charlie welcomes a green building professional from around the globe to share their war stories, career advice, and unique insight into how sustainability is shaping the built environment. So settle in, grab a fresh cup of coffee, and get ready to find out why green building matters.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. I get to interview a green building professional somewhere in the world. And today, even though I'm based in Atlanta, Georgia, not too far up Interstate 85, I've got Jim Hambright coming to us from Greenville, South Carolina. He's got a lot of roots in North and South Carolina. And I can't wait to unpack his story. So, Jim, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Charlie. How are you?
Doing great. And, I know we've connected in our LEED Fellow network and at Green Build. And just, learning a little more about you has been fascinating. So let's tell our podcast listeners, though, hey, where'd you get your start? So where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school?
Well, originally I'm from South Carolina in a small town just south of Charlotte, a town called Rock Hill. Relatively small town, about 40,000 people when I was there, although today I don't know what the population is.
Yeah.
It was really, some people may consider it a mid-sized town, but I always considered it kind of a small town. And maybe it was all relative to the fact that Charlotte was so big and growing all the time around us.
Yeah, because this is just south of Charlotte, right? For those looking at Charlotte, North Carolina, booming. Rock Hill's just across the line in South Carolina? Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. It's probably 30 minutes or so drive.
Okay. And then growing up there, you decided to go to school in the Carolinas. Is that right?
Yeah, I had looked at several different schools, but I decided to follow my father's footsteps and go to the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And so I went there, graduate work. And then when I got out of there, I was trying to really decide whether to go to graduate school or just to work as an apprentice to be an architect. And ended up selecting Clemson University, not too far from Greenville here, and went there for my work.
Oh, two amazing schools here in the Southeast United States. Well, I've got to ask, though, because I think your undergrad was in chemistry, but then I just heard architecture, and I know later you became an architect. So what was that about?
Well, when I first started, I was going in the pre-dental program. So chemistry was a major curriculum at the time. And so as things evolved, the pre-dental program that I was enrolled in was a 3-year program with 4 years of dental school after that. And so along the way, I was taking some art and architecture, history classes, and really found that was where my interest really lay. And so I continued to get my degree in chemistry, but I also had to get art history in there as well as a second degree. And that's what really propelled me to go into architecture school.
I see. Okay. Thanks for connecting the dots there. And, Clemson's got a great program. And so tell us, okay, you're getting out and your path is architecture. What was it like there? Even the job market, you found a good architect to start with. How'd that go?
Well, I was working in a small office with just a single architect when I first got started, actually during the summer. And then as summers went on, I would get summer work, and I ended up working for an employee-owned firm, which no longer exists around here in the Spartanburg. It was originally Lockwood Green, and then it morphed into a few different companies after I left, and they were bought out. So that's kind of how I got into a larger engineering firm, which had a fairly decent emphasis on architecture.
Gotcha. No, thank you for that. And so what about sustainability, though? You're a LEED Fellow. Clearly we're going to talk about the good work you've done for many years between your architecture career and obviously at the company you spent so much time. But when did sustainability start showing up?
Well, it's kind of interesting because sustainability was it seemed to be always rooted in everything I did, even from the early ages when I was in early school years. And so it was always it was never really something that I thought about. It just kind of was something that was just part of me, that I don't know whether it was growing up, the influence of my parents or my friends or my teachers or all of the above. And I think it just is a culmination of so many things, of being very active outside, being involved in scouting and seeing the benefits of scouting and being out in nature quite a bit. And then as this kind of progressed, it showed up in my work. It wasn't really consciously showing up in my work, but it was there. And then I said, well, it seems obvious from what I'm producing that sustainability is pretty major part of what I'm about.
I've heard from several I've interviewed that were in scouts, or just that connection to outdoors in their youth. I mean, it just lines up. It just makes sense for you to get into this work. So tell us about your architecture journey early on. What kind of buildings were you working on? Was it commercial or residential? What was going on early in that architecture career?
Well, it's in school, my thesis was on the Environmental Science Center, which was here in Greenville. It was actually a Buckminster Fuller sesquicentennial building that he was forming a large cube that was on an angle off of one of the local mountains here. And then there was a center involved in some facilities underneath that cube. Well, as it turned out, that cube had some structural issues. And so Mr. Fuller kind of abandoned the project. The state owned it originally, and then they gave it to the school district. And as part of my thesis project, I contacted the school district and worked pretty closely with them, trying to reuse some of their facilities that were already in place and making the most of the property around, doing a lot of master planning. And so it turned out that kind of springboarded into other projects that I was working with that had either master planning, land use, environmental slant to them.
Wow, that's a really cool project to be involved with early. All right, so now connect the dots. You've got your architecture journey along the way, and then, as I understand your bio, a lot of time there at Fluor Corporation. So tell us how you got into that business.
Well, it's when I left Lockwood Green in the mid-1970s and had an opportunity to go to work with Fluor. And so I was exposed to a lot of different projects and a lot of different things there, but there was not a whole lot of emphasis on the environmental aspects within that organization as being one of the primary elements that they focused on. But still, I incorporated that into the projects that I worked on. And it just seemed to evolve from there to when the U.S. Green Building Council was formed. It was kind of just fell into that path because of my interest in the fact that I felt it was the right thing to do and the right thing to help Fluor get involved with those types of projects. And so from that point on, I kind of just took it upon myself to go out and take some courses and become a LEED AP at the time in the early 2000s.
Yeah, that's right when LEED was getting ramped up. So for those that don't know, we've got an international audience here listening, and I know this is a big company, but just how would you describe what Fluor does?
Well, Fluor is a mixture of construction engineering supported by architecture and a myriad of other disciplines within that organization. And they're global. They have offices in 35 or 40 different countries and about 40,000 regular employees, but it fluctuates so much because it's being heavily construction driven and, kind of at the whim of where the emphasis is on construction and projects going up and down. That number obviously changes quite a bit over time.
I see. No, thank you. That's a big company. And must have treated you right because you've been there a long time. So as you look back a little bit, Jim, did you have any mentors along the way? Maybe someone that kind of opened the door for you or you looked up to?
Certainly from the very beginning, I had teachers who were very influential to just about everything that I have become today. And beyond them, there have just been so many people. I mean, there have been friends that have helped along the way. There have been colleagues which have helped. There have been architects that I worked for that tried to help me along the way. And when I got into Fluor and the large engineering companies, it's amazing how many people are there and can be in a supportive role. Department managers and engineering managers and directors of project that really supported what I did, even though when you're in a large organization, it's sometimes a struggle to change the course of a very large boat, if you will. to change the steering on that because there's so many facets that you have to deal with in a larger company, and to bring the environmental issues, sustainability issues to the forefront and make them one of the primary drivers is quite a struggle, but it's been pretty successful within the Fluor organization. Over the past 20 years, we've actually developed good plans, sustainability plans, and they've been very supportive of what I've done.
I can tell you went out and learned it and said, hey, this is how we're going to do it. And you've accomplished a lot there. So give us a peek in. Is there like a sustainability team or just certain subject matter experts like you that kind of sprinkle in your expertise to different projects? Like, how does it work there?
Well, there are a lot of different organizations, business organizations, they call them business units within Fluor. And sustainability crosses all of those units. We have government work, we have life sciences work, pharmaceutical work, electronics work, mining and metals work. I mean, it's almost everything you can imagine. And so we don't have it's really been me trying to drive and influence projects that I have either been brought into or that I've been able to make sustainability more widespread and more known within the organization. But it's really just me. And then there's a group of people that works on projects, but there's not a core group that you would call sustainability group at Fluor. But there are several lead APs that support projects all over the globe. And one of the things that I had done was we have so many projects and I've kind of felt on call 24 hours a day. So I created these lead focus groups is what I call them, just sustainability support groups in the 3 major time zones around the globe. So I have people in each one of those who is kind of coordinating projects and needs. And we kind of talk back and forth. They have full-time 24-hour support for any sustainability or lead projects or BREEAM or any other projects. And so it gives our clients more of a comfortable feeling that we really are paying attention and we're staying on top of their projects as well as the latest innovations.
Wow. Okay. That's a lot of expertise and global. Yeah. You mentioned other programs, not just LEED. So you must have done a lot of LEED projects though. You're a LEED fellow. Congratulations. And so that's got to be a proud accomplishment. I'm curious, what has that meant to you, Jim? And then what are a couple other accomplishments you're pretty proud of if you look back?
Well, it certainly has been an honor to be recognized for the work I've done. It's, when we're all out in the midst of the battles, if you will, it's hard to even think about recognition or anything else. You're just trying to get the work done and, trying to solve the problems when they come up and provide options and opportunities and research to help the clients to do the best thing they can do. And of course, there's always a struggle with schedule and budget and now supply chain and a lot of other issues that we have to deal with, seems like on a daily basis. But, pushing it through has been very rewarding for each one of these projects. And there have been a lot that I've been involved with, but it's never just been me. It's been a whole group of people who are working in a sometimes coordinated effort to get things done. And it's construction, it's engineering, it's architecture, it's all the different disciplines. It's the project managers and construction managers that are really make all this come about.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you for looking back. So fast forward to today. What's maybe keeping you busy today, all things considered?
Well, I've been tackling quite a number of jobs on the government side lately, in addition to finishing up work for some of our major clients, pharmaceutical clients. We're doing solutions for carbon neutrality, carbon sequestration, embodied carbon. And it's a major focus and major driver that we hear a lot more about. We are in a lot of conversations with clients trying to support their needs in that arena. But we're also having to say, we understand this is very important, but we also don't want you to forget about all the other aspects of sustainability. And that's been quite a challenge because it's one of those things that, when something gets going, becomes very popular and everybody wants to jump onto the train, it's hard to make sure that they're not going the wrong way too exclusively. But I've been working on just getting off of several data centers, which are a real opportunity because there's so many of them. There's so much money involved in them. There's so much opportunity to provide facilities that are built in a certain way. And there are many aspects that can be capable for each one of those clients that are doing it, because we have several clients that are building in all over the world. And of course, there's going to be a close regional network from one to the next, because they get so spaced out. That's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to do a lot of infill projects. Yeah. And of course, I'm still doing electronics facilities and pharmaceutical facilities, which are, there's just a lot of investment in the development of drugs and things of that nature, and development of different technologies that can be done in a sustainable way, even though they've been done in a certain way with maybe not such sustainable techniques over the past 20, actually 30 years.
No kidding. And that's fun because you're jumping multiple industries. So you're taking all this knowledge you've had over this sustainability career, and I can tell you still like the problem solving here. And I'm seeing a lot of growth in data center, like you said, logistics, labs. I mean, those are growing sectors that it sounds like you're applying your knowledge to. So I love it.
Yeah. We're also looking at green hydrogen facilities, different gases, and how can they best be not only produced and stored, but distributed. And of course, we do wind farms and we do solar farms, and a lot of those are just a little too large scale for most applications and most locations. So Fluor has actually gotten into these small nuclear reactor with a company called NuScale, which is really going to benefit having power generation without transmission loss, so they can be more strategically located rather than have to be located so far from centers of where they're distributing the power. It's nice. It's a good technology that'll be really beneficial.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know a lot about that. We're seeing in the news a lot of different emerging energy sources, and, there's a lot more people coming onto this planet. So we got to figure out how to power it all and be as sustainable along the way as we can. Right, Jim?
That's correct.
And that's a good segue to my next question, which I love to ask is, hey, what's coming down the road? What are you kind of excited about? Where's this kind of green building movement? What's next?
Well, the beauty of where we're heading is that manufacturers and producers are getting on board. There's much less reluctance. I mean, I was working on a project, actually a proposal for Archer Daniel Midlands, who were, you go out to these there's more small scale farms, and how are they treating the community? How are they treating the people? What the soil to keep it active? It's not like, you grow corn and then you sit fallow for 7 years before you can produce anything else. But they really are looking into the science and the microbes and how they can get better production, better yield rates. And there's a lot of small things that can be done like that we look at for all of our projects, which makes it very interesting to me, is just if you tweak something just in a minor way, it sometimes can have a significant long-term benefit.
And you've got your hands in a lot of different parts of the movement. It's not just buildings here. So I find that fascinating, Jim. And I guess working for such a large company is probably allowed for you to do that. I'm curious, I'm a small business owner. You've worked for this very large company. Any advice to companies in general? How do you keep someone like you around so long? Is it allow for intrapreneurship? I don't know. What is it? What's the secret?
Not real sure I know the secret. It's something that, as long as I'm allowed to explore things that benefit not just me, but benefit the environment, benefit the people, and that it doesn't ruffle too many feathers, and I'm allowed to do it. I guess probably the biggest thing is, companies like Fluor, they always have people that are going to be there to support people that do things like I do, and they want that expertise. They think that there's a benefit to it because the benefit has been proven historically. And, you have to work for a company that's fairly open-minded, no matter how rigid they might be in some of the things that they do. Because, you have to have a structure. You have to have that. You can't have too much flexibility, but if you have enough flexibility, it allows people like me to work within the organization.
Yeah. Allow that creativity, enough structure, the company's successful, can fuel some of your ideas. And just that's what I hear. You need to make sure employees have autonomy. They might know what's expected, but autonomy, a little flexibility, and that's exciting. Thank you for sharing. All right, well, let's get to know you a little bit more here, Jim. What would you say is your specialty or gift?
I'm not really sure I can answer that. It's
a different way to ask it, if you don't know, would be, what would a colleague say, or a coworker, or maybe your wife? What would others say about you?
Well, I'm not sure, but the thing that keeps driving me is to have a good, well-grounded knowledge in a lot of different fields. And when you do that, then you can look at problems in a little different way than if you're just focused on one item or just have a specialty in one area. Fluor has subject matter experts, and I'm a subject matter expert in several different fields rather than just one field. And so I think it's kind of along the same lines as what you're asking, is to keep a broad view of things and have a good understanding about not only what's going on and what's available today, but historically, what's happened in the past, and how can you take that and adapt it to today? Because, we're not the first people to think about having enough water or having power or having a shelter, someplace to live. It's kind of evolves. And how are you building off of that? It's like designers and architects. You learn from other architects. You learn historically, you learn from the techniques they use and the organization they have for buildings and how they construct buildings and how they detail buildings and what are the successes and what are the failures. So hopefully you can take that knowledge and spring off of that to have a better solution.
Thank you for that. All right. So, do you have any good habits or routines that have kept you on point?
I focus my day on so many things. It's not any one thing. I try to have a good variety and a good mix of things that I do during the day. I do a lot of research, a lot of online research now, because it's so much more than going out and finding magazines or subscribing to magazines or getting books and going out and researching in the library or something. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have libraries, but I'm thinking because they're a great resource for some people. But for me, I have so much more flexibility and capability by doing research online, with the caveat and understanding that you have to make sure you're going to good sources because there's a lot of things that are out there that are overwhelming and not always accurate.
That's a good point. Well, it sounds like your research methods have evolved, but there's so much information out there at our fingertips. Thanks for giving us a peek in there. So let's take a look at a bucket list as we get to know each other a little more, Jim. I'm a fan of a bucket list. Hey, what are one or two things maybe on your bucket list? Any adventure, any travel? You want to write a book?
All of the above. I mean, the benefit of working for a company like Fluor, one of the benefits is you get to do a lot of traveling all over the world and work in a lot of different areas and meet a lot of different people and cultures and have at least a small understanding of how other people live and what their lives are like. And I enjoy doing that. And my wife and I do as much traveling as we can that's non-project related because we both enjoy that. And that's really been a great experience. And of course, I take my camera with me. And so I'm sure it's kind of annoying to my wife and perhaps to others, but I do a lot of off the map, off the grid kind of exploration on my own. And I really do enjoy that and enjoy going to places that really are off the map, so to speak. But as far as, I would love to compile the photographs I've taken. I would love to write about some of the experiences, although I don't think I'm well-versed enough to write. So it's be more of a picture book than narrative. But yeah, I just continue to enjoy going to different places. There are just so many options and opportunities that yet to be explored.
Yeah. What's the next destination? What's on the 2023 travel list?
Let's see. Just got back from Portugal this year, and that was very interesting. I actually ventured into Spain a little bit, but this year, hopefully we'll get a chance to go to Alaska, and looking forward to that.
Wow, that sounds amazing. That's on my bucket list. I've not been there yet. All right, just a few more questions here, Jim. This is a fun conversation. I'm enjoying it. So speaking of books, is there a book you'd recommend to our audience or a documentary or something? Just a pro tip. Here's something that really you enjoyed. A book, a documentary.
Well, you've hit an area that's probably one of my weaknesses that I seldom get the luxury to indulge in. Reading is so important, and I certainly have taught my children to do that as they were growing up. And, it's one of the things that I always encourage because it's so critical to the development of just about everybody that I meet. And I'm really envious of those that I talk to that are talking about a book that they just read or recommending a book. And there have been very few that I spend a lot of time reading in magazines and doing research. So it's not like I don't like to read. I do enjoy reading, but I just don't when you work 10, 12 hours a day, it's just hard to get a book in there somewhere. But, I enjoy books that talk about, history people have done. And sometimes it's with individuals, sometimes it's with the evolution of countries. I was reading a book in 21 several years ago based on a recommendation of a colleague of mine. And it was talking about China and how they really evolved from an imperialistic country to become very inward. They basically closed their doors after some of the problems they explored when they were exploring, bringing back so many problems and being so spread out. And it never really thought about how much they were exploring in such an early age. And there are also books that really interest me that there's much rich history that gets, as my wife and I talk about often, gets washed away in the history books and summarized down to where, this great story is now 3 sentences long or 1 sentence long. And, I was reading along with my son, one of my sons, a book about the immortal life of Henrietta Lacks. And it was just so interesting how one person and the genes from that person, which are still present today, are affecting the lives and livelihood of so many people. And it's a book I would highly recommend if the readers or listeners haven't read it. It's just a really interesting, well-written book. Rebecca Skloot wrote it, and she's a journalist, and she did great research on it. And it's just amazing that when you look at a story like that, you realize that there are millions of other stories that are not like that, but could be very similar to that we never hear about. There's just a rich treasure trove of stories that make up this world that we just aren't aware of.
Wow. Dude, you had all kinds of good book recommendations in there. So thank you. We're going to put a link there in our podcast show notes so everybody can check that out, Jim. Great recommendation. All right, 2 more things. One is, if you look back on your career, is there anything you wish you'd have known a little earlier? A little career advice you wish you'd have known earlier?
I'm not sure. I guess as I've gone through and worked at small offices of just me and another architect and large offices that I'm in now, you really have to take care of yourself in your own career because nobody else is going to do it for you. And, when I first started, I said, well, if I do good work, people will recognize it and it'll just come naturally. And I found out that's really not the case. If you really want to advance, you really want to get things done that you have an investment in and really believe in, that you really have to work hard for it. And you have to really plan your own career and plan your own path of how to get it done.
You got to control your own destiny there. I love that. All right, last question. So let's say someone's listening to this conversation. They're inspired by what they've learned about you and your green building career, but they're just now jumping in to this movement that's been good to you. It's been good to me. Any words of encouragement, Jim, as we come to a close, to someone that's just now jumping in? Well,
the biggest thing that I've found that's been helpful is to seek out those that are like-minded, the same thing you're doing. There's all sorts of projects and information out there that you can research. But if you have a local group of people, You can actively bounce ideas back and forth off each other. You can actually form relationships and learn more about what it is that you really want to do that benefits you and the environment around you. So I think that's probably the biggest recommendation I would make. It's, try to find, if you can find places to work, even on a part-time basis of where your interest is, that would also benefit you and benefit them.
And some sage advice there. So everybody connect with Jim on LinkedIn. Let him know what you thought of the podcast. And I'm glad I got to get to know you more today. And just want to say thanks for being on the podcast.
Well, thank you, Charlie, for having this forum to be able to share this information, because as we get older, we won't, we don't want to hoard the information to ourselves. We want to get it out to as many people as we can so everybody can benefit from it.
100%. And actually, the motto of our podcast is teach everything you know. And I even have some T-shirts. So next time I say, I'll give you one. Teach everything you know. So everybody have an awesome day. And thanks for listening to the podcast.
I just want to say thank you to our loyal listeners. We actually are celebrating over 1 year here on the Green Building Matters podcast. Me and the entire team were stoked and just so glad you continue to listen every Wednesday morning to a new interview with a green building professional here in this industry, or just some pro tips that we want to make sure that you are getting straight from us, straight to you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Green Building Matters podcast. At gbes.com, our mission is to advance the green building movement through best-in-class education and encouragement. Remember, you can go to gbes.com/podcast for any notes and links that we mentioned in today's episode. And you can actually see the other episodes that have already been recorded with our amazing guests. Please tell your friends about this podcast. Tell your colleagues. And if you really enjoyed it, leave a positive review on iTunes. Thank you so much, and we'll see you on next week's episode.